Hello, this is Brandon Owen. I'm an orthodontist from Fort Collins, Colorado. I'm also the president and founder of KLOwen Custom Braces, the world's first in-office digital bracket prescription. It kind of stemmed from just looking back on what the best advancements really have been in the fixed appliance realm. And without a doubt, if you look at what's operationalized in our efficiencies in orthodontics more than any other invention in fixed at least, it's Andrew's straight wire appliance. And it really allowed us to greatly reduce the doctor time per visit with each patient, because instead of having to put a bend for all three orders of movement between every single tooth, it let us get much closer to the bullseye right from the beginning, so we could start focusing on smaller details. And what this translated to for patients was much less time in braces for the patients. And then overall, not only in terms of doctor time, but just in terms of time spent in the dental chair, those shorter appointments reduced the amount of overhead needed to have like assistants and other things working on these patients, and allowed us to expand our capacity far more than anything else in terms of recent evolution in orthodontic fixed appliances. So going from being able to see 5 to 10 or 20 patients a day at maximum before the straight wire appliance, it really expanded our horizons in being able to treat 60 to 120 patients a day. And the really cool thing that happened with that evolution is not only did we see it happen with more efficiency, but it raised and elevated the outcome of the quality of our cases rather than detracting from it. So it's not very often in any specialty where you get not only better efficiencies, but also improvement in quality. And if you look to digital, it's really kind of the next evolution in that chain. And we've all heard orthodontic faculty tell us at one time or another that if you put the braces in the right place, the case treats itself. And we actually end up having to spend most of our day in the orthodontic practice repositioning brackets and putting bends and wires because we didn't get the braces in the right place. And so if we can use digital where we can actually see the end in mind before we even put the braces on the patient's teeth, it can hopefully help operationalize a lot more efficiencies as well. Lots of articles out there on digital custom braces compared to conventional. Everything from Sure Smile to Incognito. This is one of my favorites to reference. It talks about insignia used in David Sarver's office, one of the most talented orthodontists, and it was oversaw by Dr. Profit. So the quality of the research was as good as it could be for a retrospective trial, but what it found was that the patient spent way less time in braces, 37% faster in a class 1 patient subpopulation. And not only did they get faster treatment, but their outcomes were better. And the 20 to 30% range has to do with adults and kids. But both of those groups scored better on the ABO scoring with a digital custom bracket prescription than with conventional analog brackets. And then what the study also found was that there were way fewer office visits, meaning we could reduce time in the office because we were able to cut out 40% of the office visits. And so if you look what that means for orthodontic profit, we can make so much more per day, and we can actually do it with fewer staff and fewer overhead expenses because we can cut out a huge number of the appointments that were needed to get the braces put on, all adjusted and removed. And so again, this is a great opportunity for us to increase our capacity, and doing so with still an elevated result. The big thing with all this digital indirect bonding coming out right now, though, is the digital on its own isn't enough. And there's a lot of systems like OrthoSelect and 3Shape and iRock DDS and RCAD and Exceed. And just using those where you can actually see the virtual setup is great. But the problem is if you're not using a custom bracket prescription, you're going to have tooth shape, tooth size differences. You're going to have torque issues that you're not going to be able to get the brackets in the right place. And also, you're going to see in one of the upcoming slides that there's so much slop in our bracket systems now as they stand that you really have to do still a lot of bending, a lot of adjusting to these wires, and a lot of repositioning if you want to be able to get that platform to still work out and show the true customization that you need. Because if you look at this video, what you'll see is in the first and second order, braces control things pretty well in terms of an expression. But if you watch the torsional direction with a 1925 stainless steel wire in the 022 slot, what you see is 45 degrees of slop between two brackets. So 22.5 degrees of slop per bracket wire interface. And then when you have two consecutive and adjacent brackets, then that adds up to 45 degrees. And really what this means is that we don't have any control over this aspect of our orthodontic appliance. And if you watch this little video on the digital setup, I only did a 30-degree adjustment on this, and what you'll see if you look at the marginal ridges and the lingual cusp tips is that 45 degrees of slop equates to a lot of slop and a lot of inability to control the vertical dimension and also just the torque the third order dimension with our orthodontic appliances. So look at just the significance of that marginal ridge alignment and lingual cusp because of that 45 degrees of slop. And just doing some simple geometry, at least with this typodont, when you measure the bracket arch wire interface to the lingual cusp of the upper second premolar, and just do some simple calculations, what you'll find is with that 45 degrees of slop, that equates to 7 millimeters of slop total, and that means that lingual cusp can be traveling on an arc 7 millimeters, which is, again, a crazy lack of control. And so some people might say, well, maybe the answer here then is to fill the slot, use mechanics that always have us filling the slot, but that's actually a huge mistake with a non-customized bracket prescription, because if you look at this picture, you might notice the upper right 6 with full torque expression has a palatal cusp that's way off the occlusal plane, and then if you look at the upper right 5, you'll notice that the lingual cusp is dipped below the occlusal plane. And again, it just has to do with this tooth morphology. The buccal surface, depending on the convexity and depending on the shape of it, can express much, much differently from one tooth to another and between patients in that torsional direction. And filling the slot can actually make things fall off worse. You can actually create more malalignment issues with lingual cusps and marginal ridges. And on top of that, the big thing is that a lot of these prescriptions are built upon there being slop, meaning that there's been overcorrection put into the bracket prescription. So if you fill the slot, you're actually going to make things worse. So where do we go from here? And I think the big thing is that there are other digital bracket systems that have come out before, but they've all got a couple big pitfalls to them. Number one is price. Anytime you're actually making something customized for a patient after you take the input data, it takes a lot of money to do that. And then the other big thing is it takes time to manufacture any custom pieces for each individual patient afterward. And so those two things have really prevented digital customization from being the mainstream already in orthodontics. The other thing is, of all of the digital systems that exist, only SureSmile really gives you the opportunity to do mid-course correction in case things aren't going right. And so if you think about this from just kind of a spectrum from where we are now, on one end of the scale, we've got these stock brackets where we put the same braces on every single patient that we see as orthodontists. On the other end of the spectrum, we've got Insignia, or a customized system, where a milling machine goes in and actually cuts that bracket perfect shape for each individual tooth for each individual patient, which again is very expensive and takes a long time to do. But I don't think either one of these things is going to be sustainable in the long run with this conversion to the digital age. And some sort of middle ground option is going to be what perseveres. And our concept is really this prefabricated custom braces system, meaning you've already got all the parts and pieces made and created and in your office ready to go on demand. You just need to personalize the prescription for each patient. And this really kind of is a great analogy to bring back to just a layperson, just in terms of how the shoe industry works. So think about on one end of the spectrum, it'd be like going to a shoe store and having the shoe salesman tell you, we only have size 15 shoes, but we've got foam padding that we can use to stuff in around your foot, and we can make that system work for you. It's not going to be perfect, but it'll be inexpensive, and right on the spot you can get a pair of shoes. And on the other end of the spectrum, think about going into a shoe store and having the option be that you have your foot measured in every direction, and the shoe salesman says, we are going to make you the best fitting pair of shoes you've ever had. We're going to design them just to fit your teeth perfectly, and it's going to take us 7 weeks, and it's going to cost us $2,000 to get them back, but you'll have the best fitting shoe we've ever had in your life. And the reality is that option, neither of those things exist. We need something in the middle that lets us have a close enough fit to ideal every time, but not have this huge expense on either end of the scale. And so the prefabricated custom just allows us to have different thicknesses of each of the bracket. So on the left side of the screen, you'll kind of see the narrowest, and then it gets gradually thicker. So you can position that cusp tip and the marginal ridges exactly where you want it to go for every single tooth in the mouth. And then we also have a group of third order variations. So all of those thicknesses will also have different torques. So you can move the root lingually, you can move the root buccally, and no matter where on that continuum the tooth needs to go, you've got yourself covered. So here's our matrix. These are the brackets that we have, and on the left-hand side of this matrix, you'll see the positive torque value when we are using at least on an upper incisor, and as you go to the right, it becomes a negative torque value for an upper canine or premolar. And then from top to bottom, the top row is our thinnest bracket, the middle row is our intermediate, and then the lower row is our thickest. And these are the same 15 brackets that we use for all of the maxillary teeth in front of the molar. So upper premolars, upper canines, and our upper incisors. And then we also use them on the lower canines and premolars. We have a narrower bracket for the lower anterior teeth. And these ones actually can be flipped upside down and right side up. And that way we cover the whole range of torques with just 6 brackets for those. And we have varying thicknesses for those as well. So again, trying to keep our inventory management low. Then we just needed 6 molars with variation in torque only. And so with 27 brackets, we're able to do everything that a stock bracket does. With 25 or 26 brackets is what the usual inventory is. But we can do it with just a couple more brackets, actually have a fully customized approach for every patient. So every single person experiences their own customization for every case. The other big things that we did with this bracket prescription, if I go back, you can see how our slot size is not 018 and it's not 022. We actually designed the bracket to fit optimally with a 1925 wire. And we chose this because the 1925 is the most popular finishing wire, and orthodontists know how to use it, know its properties really well. So we wanted to have a slot filling appliance because we know that that's how digital works the best. And so that wire is going to fit perfectly in the arch wire slot. And then on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see our bracket notches, our retention grooves that allow us to have that indirect bonding tray grip these brackets better than any other bracket. And we like a soft indirect bonding tray. It just has a lot of big advantages, better fit, and better adaptation. And these retention grooves really make sure that we have the proper torque expression. And so if you watch this series of slides, what you'll see is that if you only have a one-size-fits-all bracket and you've got a small premolar, you're not going to have the cusp tip and marginal ridge aligned just right. But what this will let you do is actually move the tooth digitally in 0.1 millimeter increments, and every half millimeter it'll actually auto-populate a new bracket. And so we always have the tooth in the right position, full flexibility to move things forward or buccal or lingual, but it'll always do so with less than a half millimeter of composite thickness between the bracket and the base of the tooth. So we're always keeping things adapted very, very closely to optimize our bond strength every single time. So really having that thickness variation allows us to position the teeth customarily for every single patient.